Hey everybody, this is going to be a hand of the day review. Did a lot of research, and I'm going to have to keep the video very quick just because I'm a little bit limited on time, but I think this is a very good one that you'll want to watch the full way through. So just quick recap of the hand, holding 8-7, small blind versus big blind, and goes check check on the flop, goes check check on the turn, and then on the river it's a double paired board that is very dry, and Hero is holding a second pair. The question is, how big should Hero bet, or should Hero check? The responses were mostly weighed towards 75% pot, just because it seems like, I suppose, a fairly decent size. It's also the solver approved size, which we're going to look in a second. But I do think that there's a little bit merit for a slightly different option, which we're going to take a look at. So a lot of people in the comments over here did talk about using a river overbet. One of them was from Canyon, who said that either 150 or 250% pot makes sense, leaning towards the higher amount because players are going to be pretty inelastic here with ace highs and low pairs. There was another comment here about an overbet from JD. The other one that I want to read over, also from Goku, stated that a overbet would work quite well versus a stationary player, but using a smaller size probably is going to be a bit better versus the average player, and good regs aren't going to pay you too much here because it's fairly obvious that you don't hold a lot of air, which is a very interesting point that we're going to touch upon. Last one, Godson said he picked 75% pot, and the reason why is mainly because, let's see, I forget exactly why. I think it's just feeling like it's a fairly good size, which makes a lot of sense for sure, but also likes the option of either range betting for a small bet there or going for a check call. I think the range bet is quite a good option on the river. If that is the strategy you want to go with, I think it's very simple. Lately, I've been experimenting with going for very simplified strategies that are also very exploitative. I think this can make a lot of sense. But let's jump into the solver, and then we're going to talk about a few interesting concepts, as we usually do. So starting with the solution, the solver does prefer to use just 75% pot with this hand. And the reason why it's only going 75% pot is because the opponent should still have a decent amount of these stronger 8x hands. And this is just the size that allows them to defend with enough ace highs and enough weaker pairs in order for this to be profitable. However, there are a few differences in the range composition of players and in the playstyle of regs as well that really change the way that people are going to play those spots. And this is what took me a very long time to research. That's why this one's coming out a little bit late, just because I wanted to do a full deep dive since I was quite interested in it. Let's talk about those two findings. So I looked at some MDA, and then I also used the custom sample that I have for range composition to summarize just two very, very big points for you guys. And these points are relevant for single race pots as well as 3-bet pots, and also 4-bet pots, although I didn't have the range composition data for that, although it's likely to be the same pattern for that one compared to the other ones. So the two key findings are, number one, people will call much more often on very very dry boards, like double paired and big gapped boards. This applies to single race pots and 3-bet pots. I think this is a fairly interesting data point because it confirms an intuition that I had, which shaped the way that I ended up playing this hand. The data shows that people will still overfold against check-check bets for all of these lines, which is where the data comes from, but they will defend roughly 6 to 8% more frequently on these boards compared to the average texture. So there are going to be some boards where they overfold more compared to their average overfold, but this one is significantly less, which confirms the intuition that a lot of people had in those comments, that people will tend to be a little bit more defensive here, suspecting that you are going to be bluffing and sort of putting you on a very, very weak range. The fact that it's just so damn dry and so disconnected, I think is just going to make the opponent very suspicious. Especially, I think, if you go for big overbets. I think players are just going to think you're kind of full of it and maybe trying to scare them off with ace high. But either way, this is just what the data shows. And the second point is that regs ranges will be around 6 to 10% more low pairs and air than it should be. So this would be any pair that's weaker than second pair, or any misdraw, or any ace high or king high. Around a 6 to 10% more often, or more weighted towards this hand class if we're just doing the sum for the range composition. So it's definitely going to be a spot where players are more capped, both in position and out of position, because they're going to be checking twice, and every single check, for the most part, is going to cap our opponent's ranges. So that's what I tried to do over here. I ended up doing a node lock, and I just node locked them on the turn to bet too many hands like second pairs, top pairs, and trips, with the intent of making them around 6 to 10% more weighted towards ace highs and nothing hands in the spot. Then I simply reran the solution, and the solver did prefer to use an overbet, although a smaller overbet with the hand, 9-8 suited. That's simply based on our opponent being capped. But of course, the real question is, versus either of these sizes, how often will players call with their stronger hands or their weaker hands, like the pocket pairs and the ace highs? And this is going to very heavily influence the strategy that we want to take with this hand. If we just want to play exploitative, we can pick whatever size makes sense with all of our hands. If we just want to stick to one bet size, which could be a small bet or it could be like 75% with our range. But this was also a hand that was played at lower stakes. And I think we can really just play our hand the way that it wants to be played without paying much attention to balance at that level. So I think it's important to understand just how big we want to bet with the 9-8 suited. I do think players are going to be very inelastic when they're holding ace highs or weaker pairs against the sizing, because if they think you're full of it, it's just going to be a call. And if anything, I honestly feel like a bigger bet size might make them a little bit more suspicious, because although it can make sense for you to use 150 with a hand like 9-8 suited, they might not really put that in your range when you're going for a very big bet. Maybe they're thinking that this very big bet would either be a slow play with like a king that you ended up checking, or it's just air. And this line is going to be full of bluffs. Ranges are very wide. I think that if somebody thinks you're full of it for the smaller overbet, you might as well just use a bigger overbet for sure. So let's see how this one played out. This will be the final thing for the hand. And I'm sorry, this hand was actually played at 50 NL, not 100 like I initially thought. Hero decided to go for 3.25x spot on the river, which is maybe a little bit too big, but Hero did end up getting called with ace-4 offsuit. So that is the demonstration of this concept. I don't know if this is optimal or not. I never am able to say things with 100% certainty because I think it's foolish to do that with so many unknowns. But I do like the way that the hand was played, and I think going for a big overbet here makes a lot of sense for all of the reasons mentioned. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.